Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As before that, I'm so sorry because I'm not using my background because I use my mobile phone. First of all, let's pray and thank our God Allah Subhanahu wa Taala who has been given us our mercies and blessing. So today we can continue our Venezuelan meeting exactly. Yes, lecturer 2021 International Class Program of English Language Education Department. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before starting our agenda today, let's open our meeting today by reciting the Basmalah together.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Our agenda run well. Our subject today is language instructional design with topic basic of lesson planning of ELT. Let me, my pleasure to introduce you all our professional moderator today. He is phenomenally lecturer who teaches in English education in Waly Semarang. I think that all of students here also know she is please join me in welcoming Mom Dr. Siti Tarwiyah M. Hum. Hello, Mom Siti Tarwiyah.
Hello, Priani. Hello.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Okay, because she is also has joined. So time is yours, ma'am, now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, good morning, all of you. Thanks for joining our session today, this morning, and we are going to have Dr. Salma Waly, and before learning something, many things, I think, from her, let me introduce her. Dr. Salma Waly is an assistant professor in Hunter College and Pace University School of Education. She is also the CEO and co-founder of Universal Narratives LLC, an educational consultancy and podcasting company. She earned her PhD in education with a focus on language, literacy, and culture from the University of Pittsburgh. She has master's degree in TESOL from the American University in Cairo and another master's degree in educational leadership from Queens College. She is an expert teacher trainer and curriculum designer, who has worked with educators and students from almost all continents. Dr. Waly is a global citizen who has lived in 3 countries and studied in 4 different cities around the world. So she's very a person with wide experience, I think. And I think it's a good choice to invite you, Dr. Waly, with us today. Okay, the session is fully given to you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's really my pleasure. And I'm very honored to be here today and meet with my brothers and sisters in a different continent and a different country that is very dear to my heart, Indonesia. I'm very happy to be here today and speak to you all. And I really appreciate that you woke up early to attend this session. I'm sure your days are busy and your schedules are busy, but I really appreciated that you made the time to attend my presentation today, my lecture. It's actually 9 p.m. in New York. I am in New York City. So I am very excited to be ending my day with something very positive like this. And I'm actually also very excited because this is my first time to give a class to 220 people. Usually my classes in New York are smaller. But I'm very, very happy that I have such a big group of very hardworking students here today, and I'm sure you will all make amazing language educators. So the topic that I picked today is the basics of lesson planning in English language education. And So the format is going to be a little bit of lecturing, a little bit of questions and answers. You can ask me questions throughout. I will be stopping and asking you if you have questions, and you can ask questions. I also have a few activities where I'm going to ask you to participate in some brainstorming and thinking about how to do things in the classroom, just because I want you to. I know some of you are probably teaching, and some of you are probably just being prepared to be teachers. So it's good to like just put yourself in that situation and think about, okay, how am I going to do this in the classroom? So we're going to have these instances as well throughout the presentation. And then we're going to have like a wrap up and a summary in the end to just discuss everything that we learned together today. Before I start, I think Dr. Siti Taria already gave a bio about my experience. I just want to say that I'm very passionate about TESOL. I have been doing TESOL for the past 15 years in like 3 different countries, and it's really an amazing field because it changes you as a person. It makes you understand where people come from and how important language is for people, not only to communicate, but sometimes to survive in new environments. And sometimes it's very empowering for people, especially English, because it's a lingua franca. Lingua franca means it's a language that even non-native speakers of the language use it to communicate with each other. It's a common language. So English is a common language. People use it everywhere they go in the world. If you come in America, even if you go in China, people would still be speaking. If you go like even in Arab speaking countries, sometimes you will speak English because it's the common language that everybody understands. So it's a global language, it's an international language, and it's a language that empowers people. It makes your life um, it improves the quality of your life because it's the language of education, it's the language of business, it's the language of transactions. And I'm sure you learn about the importance of English in so many of your courses in the university as well. So what I'm going to start, and you can, in the end, you can, I'm gonna start the presentation, but in the end, you can ask me any questions specific to my experience or my journey as an educator. If you really want to pursue a profession like this, how would you do it? I can give you also some ideas for how to do that. I like that everybody is muted. If you have questions, you can put the raise up the hand sign, and I'm going to you can ask your question then. So let's start. Bismillah. uh, Here is my presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay. So here is the, okay, so everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Great. So the basics of lesson planning in ELT. And the first thing I would like to ask everyone is, if you, let's move on here. Okay. Let me present. Bismillah. Okay. So the first thing I want to ask everyone is, do we, when the idea of lesson planning comes to our minds, what are some of the required components, the elements of the lesson plan that any teacher should put in mind? What comes to your mind first? Anybody would like to volunteer with an answer?
Volunteer, please.
You can unmute yourself and just suggest some components if you would like. No? Okay, so some of the elements that come to my mind usually when I'm doing a lesson plan is, what kind of activities am I going to use in the lesson in order to deliver the content that I'm trying to teach? Also, I think about, okay, how am I going to make sure that the students actually understand what I'm teaching? So it's the idea of assessment. Another idea that comes to my mind is, what is my goals? Where did I come with these goals? Is it part of the curriculum that I'm teaching? Is it required in my school? What determines which goals and standards am I using in my class? I also think about my materials. Am I using materials that are relevant for my students that will help them understand the content or not? So many things that come to my mind when I am thinking about the idea of lesson planning. And today we're going to focus on three major components that I think are very, very important. They're key components for making any lesson plan successful. And I call it let me move on. Yes, I call it the essential components triangle. As you can see here, the essential components triangle. And this is something that I came up with after working with teacher educators for years. Right now, I'm working with teachers in New York City in public schools and private schools who are teaching English language learners. So the students in their classes are learning English because they're immigrants or refugees, or their parents do not speak the language, or they're newcomers in the country. So for so many different reasons, there is a lot of students in New York City who are learning English as a second language. And from my experience working with those teachers, the teachers are always lost. What do I need to put in mind when I'm planning an English language lesson? And then we came up with the idea of objectives, activities, and assessments. These are the three major components that I want to have in every lesson that I'm teaching. By objectives, I mean, what is my goal? And is that goal something that I just decided haphazardly, or it's something that is based on a certain set of standards and my curriculum and what my administration requires? Some places have like systems for teaching English language learners. Am I abiding by these systems? Am I including all the standards and goals and regulations that students need for this particular level or not? So objectives. What are my goals? Objectives and goals. And I don't know if you know the difference between goals and objectives. Goals is broad and objective is very specific. So for example, my goal can be, by the end of this year, I want my students to be able to read a short story in English. That's a goal. It's very broad. But to make it an objective, I have to break it down into smaller tasks for every day. So maybe one day it's going to be something like, by the end of the day, I want my students to be able to read sentences made out of two words. Another objective can be, so and you increase it gradually and until you're able to meet your big goal, which is being able to read an entire paragraph in English. So goals, always keep in mind that goals are big and objectives are small. Okay. The second component that I have in my mind is activities. In order to achieve these objectives, what activities do I need to use in the classroom in order to achieve these goals and objectives? And finally, and we're going to be speaking about each one of these in more details during the presentation. And then the final one is assessment. And assessment means making sure that my students actually understand and make sense and can use this new content that I taught them by themselves if they leave the classroom. So right now, maybe they are able to use it in the class a little bit because I'm providing them with a lot of assistance, but are they able to use it by themselves? I have to make sure that I walk outside of my classroom with evidence that my students actually are able to use this content on their own and are developing these skills by themselves. So I want to make sure that I always collect evidence and monitor their progress and record data about their performance, because just by recording this information and this data, I am able to track their development. And then later on, I will be able to see how I'm doing as a teacher and if my strategies are as a teacher are effective or not effective. So these are the three components. Think about it as a triangle. Always keep it in your mind. And as I said, we're going to go deeper into each component today in today's lecture. But objective is very important. It's like the head, and then the activities and the assessment are also very, very important. And as you can see, the arrows, they're all directed towards each other, which means that everything is connected. So it's not because objectives come first I don't really care about the assessment or the activities. Everything has to go in the same, it's like a continuous process. Why? Because after I do my assessment, I might see that my students are not really learning. So I need to maybe go back and change my objectives a little bit. So your assessment is not only good to show you if your students are learning or not, it's also good because it's going to show you if you are a teacher, if you are you an effective teacher or you're not an effective teacher. So assessment is a tool for evaluation, not only for the students, but also evaluation for the teacher. And I want you also to have this mindset that as an educator, you always have to reflect and think about your teaching. It's an ongoing process, very important. We want to achieve excellence, which is part of our religion, right? But we can't really achieve excellence without thinking and reflecting. Reflection is very important. It's part of our lifestyle, it's part of our faith, but it's also part of our profession as educators. Okay, so let's move on. Another way you can look at it, so it's a triangle: assessment, objectives, and activities. Also, there is another approach that a lot of educators talk about, which is called the backward design process. And I'm sorry, we have to go back previous. The backward design process is a term that you also hear about a lot in education these days. People talk about backward design, backward design. So, and you're not sure what backward design means, but it's really very simple, because backward means you think about the back first. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to see the students achieving? So identifying your desired results is the first one. What do I want the students to understand and know and be able to do? So that's my goal, my objective. Okay. How do I check that they learned it? What is that? Assessment, correct? And then the last one is plan learning experiences and instruction, which means what activities would help the students achieve these results. Okay, so keep these two approaches in mind, or these two models. The first one is the triangle or the backward design. Now you know which one is which. They're identical. It's just two different ways of explaining things. And you know, in education in general, there are so many different ways to explain something. It's a humanities field, and humanities means that it's not science. It's not like science where there is facts. There is always different ways of explaining things, because it's all related and connected to the human experience, and people see things differently based on their experiences and their approaches. Maybe at some point you as a teacher are going to have your own model based on these different understandings. And this is what I want you to do: not just accept things, but also think about things and develop a model that works best for you as a teacher, because you are the one who knows most about the needs of your students. And you are the one who's spending most of the time with your students. So even if your administration or your principal or your supervisor tells you to do something, you can always think about, how can I make it work best for my students? I know these are the requirements, but can I make a little bit of a change here or a change there so that my students can achieve the best results? And that's again the mindset that I want you to develop, which is to be a reflective teacher. Always think about what you're doing. Hey, so our outline today, as I said, now that we did this quick introduction, is we're going to practice writing objectives. We're going to think about communicative activities. And then the last thing we're going to do is we are going to think about assessment, how we're going to assess our students. Each of these areas can have a presentation by itself, because they're very, very, very important elements of language teaching. But we're going to be going briefly through every one of them today. And inshallah, next time we're going to be delving a little bit deeper, and we're going to be doing material design, which is also another area that is very, very important in language teaching, especially when you're teaching in a place like Indonesia, for example, where English is a foreign language. people do not always speak English outside the classroom. Maybe sometimes they do, but not always speak English outside the classroom. So you want to make sure that your materials are always as effective and authentic as possible. So for these tasks, I would actually love everybody to participate, because the presentation is not going to go well if people do not participate. So if you do not volunteer, I'm going to call on you. And I hope this is okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. So the first thing we want to know about objectives is that we need to have SMART objectives. What's the meaning of SMART? I don't know. Has anybody heard about the word SMART objectives before? Yes? No?
No,
No.
not really. Yes.
Okay, great. So SMART objectives, it's one thing that we always advise teachers to do. I'm sure maybe you don't know the word SMART, but I'm sure you already know how, like, the principles of writing an objective, okay? Because it's kind of like SMART is just one way to organize all the different thoughts that we tell our students to do into one specific, and like Americans, they always love to put everything in an acronym and just makes it easier this way. So SMART means specific. So my goal has to be specific, focused, narrow, and targeted. For example, there is a difference between I will teach students how to read, which is very broad, and I will teach students how to summarize a nonfiction text. So you see the difference? The first one is super broad. It doesn't really show me exact. Can you teach the students how to read in a one class? It's impossible. But can you show the students how to summarize a nonfiction text in one class? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the difference. I will teach students how to read is okay as a goal. Throughout the year, I can achieve that, but it would be very difficult to do it in just one class. So I need to break it down into smaller pieces or smaller objectives in order to be able to see the result of it at the end of each class. The second one is measurable. How will I measure the progress? This will help you to recognize the incremental growth and keep track of a measurable end. And measurable means when you're writing your objective. So these principles I want you to keep in mind when you're writing your objective. I want you to keep in mind that it has to be measurable. So you can't use words that you cannot measure. You have to use measurable verbs. So students will be able to write something is measurable. Students will be able to summarize, measurable. The students will be able to give a presentation. It's something measurable. I can assess it. I can have a rubric, or I can have a scale, or I can have some form of assessment in the end of the class to see if the students were able to achieve it or not. But if I say something like students will be able to understand something, can I measure that? How am I going to measure that? I don't know if they understand or not. They have to show me some action. They have to do something with the knowledge for me as a teacher to be able to assess it at the end of the class. Okay. So specific is the first one, SMART, specific, measurable, and then attainable means I aim high, but I also have to be realistic. I don't know if part of your program you have you studied about Vygotsky. I don't know. Did you study about Vygotsky, the zone of proximal development, that you have to push the students, plan your materials in such a way that is at the level of students, but a little bit higher, so that you're pushing the students to realize their full potential. You can make it less than their level because it becomes very boring. You can make it super advanced because it becomes very frustrating. So you want to make it at their level, but you want to make it a little bit challenging so that you're pushing them to learn. So you're aiming high, but at the same time, you're staying realistic. You have a student, for example, in your class who does not know how to, for example, read a sentence, like they do not know the vocabulary words yet. And for certain common vocabulary words in English, you cannot expect them to read a passage, right? Maybe you can start with reading short phrases, or maybe identifying words. So you're being realistic, but at the same time, you're aiming high. And then the next one is result-based. which means what would it look like in the end? How do I want this to look like in the end? Time bound, so I'm specifying the time. I would say by the end of this class, students will be able to summarize a nonfiction text using a graphic organizer or using some kind of a graph that I'm going to provide for them. By the end of the week, students will be able to summarize 2 pages of a book, a nonfiction book, for example, using a graph. So it has to be time bound. It can be by the end of every day, by the end of every week, by the end of a month, by the end of the semester, but it has to be super time bound and specific. And the last one is equitable. And equitable means I want to make sure that my goal addresses the needs of all students, even the students who are struggling. So, you know, in any language classroom, it's not going to be, students are not all going to be at the same level. And this is one challenge that a lot of new teachers, like when I was in your situation learning to become a teacher of English, I used to ask my professors, how am I going to make sure that I meet the needs of all the students in my class if they come from different levels? Some of them might be advanced, some of them might be intermediate, some of them might come to my class and they're just new and their language is you know, very limited. Some of them might have different learning styles. Some of them might want to do a lot of work with visuals, you know, about learning styles. Some of them might like to listen to stuff. Some of them might want to work with the stuff hands-on. How am I going to be able to do all of that as a teacher? Well, the key is that you have to do that as a teacher. That's your job as a teacher. It's a lot of work, I understand, and it's time consuming, but you choose to be a teacher, then you have to really go above and beyond to meet the needs of all your students. Even if it means a little bit more work, you want to walk out of your classroom satisfied, feeling that you fulfilled your role as a teacher and that your students are also learning something and benefiting from what you're doing in the classroom. So specific, measurable, attainable, result-based, time-bound, and equitable. Any questions before we move on? Does anybody have any questions?
May I?
Yes, go ahead. And who's that? Sorry,
Sorry. I am Arni, one of the lecturer of all these students. Yes,
Okay.
and it's very interesting. The smart one, the last one, and equitable. Yeah, because this is also a very big problem so far. So my question is, have you ever met that situations, and what did you do to overcome that problem?
That situation happens all the time, actually, especially in a place like New York. But I also worked in other countries and in other settings, and you always have students. Like I remember earlier in my career, I taught a class of refugees, and they were coming from different parts of Africa. And I could not speak the language of many of the students who were in my class. So we did not really have any common language to use to communicate with each other. So I had to figure out what to do as a teacher, and I was a new teacher. And you know, you panic a little bit in the beginning, but then you realize there are different ways. You have to keep in mind that we talk about this idea of differentiation. Differentiation means you differentiate or you adapt or adjust your materials in order to make it work for everyone. It happens also here in New York a lot with the teachers that I work with. Like, for example, some of the teachers have their class going well, and then they have a new student coming into their classroom who just came to America and they do not speak English. How would you do that? And it's required by the state that you achieve the same standards for everyone. So as a teacher, you have the same standard for everyone, but you have to teach differently. So what happens is that usually what I suggest is we differentiate, and we differentiate by grouping students. So you can put students in different groups based on their ability levels. If you can't do grouping because you're the only teacher in class, then what you can do is teach everyone, but then have give an assignment for everyone who's doing well, and the student who's struggling, you can work with them individually on the side of the class. Another way you can do is actually your handouts and your worksheets, they will have to be different. So many times, for example, teacher would have to teach like, writing a simple paragraph, for example. And you have students who just came to the country and they do not know how to write a paragraph. So what happens is that they would have a prompt, and the students who are on the level, they would just respond to the prompt and write a paragraph. And then the students who are like struggling a little bit, they would have um, like, for example, a few more prompts or sentences, and they can just complete the sentences to form the paragraph. And then the students who are struggling can just have the entire paragraph, and they can just, and a word bank, and they can just fill in the blanks with the words, the keywords. So you're meeting the needs of everyone, but you have 3 different worksheets. And the 3 different worksheets, they achieve the same thing in the end, but they're achieving the same thing differently. And this way you are meeting the needs of everyone. Equitable also can mean, like, for example, if you're giving assessments, you can give extra time, or you can provide assessment help by, for example, reading for some students. For example, some students can read on their own. Other students, you can actually read the task for them, explain it further for them. So you will have to just go above and beyond, an extra mile, to make sure that their needs are met, either by grouping them differently, asking an assistant teacher to work with the lower level students and provide them with more assistance, differentiating your worksheets and handouts. Also, as I said, it can be giving them extra time, giving them more resources, working with them during your free period, or if you can talk to your administration, maybe they can find times where the students can come outside of their classrooms where they're not doing very well and learn English on the side. So it depends again on the specific system that your school follows, and if these options are allowed or not. But what is allowed for sure is that you can group differently and you can change worksheets to make it, meet the needs for everyone in your class. And also what you can do is use different materials. So don't assume that if you give a presentation that everybody is going to understand the presentation. Use more visuals, use a video, use a YouTube clip or something, just to bring the idea closer to the understanding of your students. Just vary your techniques, because even the advanced students, they're still going to enjoy the video, they're still going to enjoy the pictures. Everybody likes that. Even the games that you play in the classroom, they might be easy for some students, but everybody still enjoys. Believe me, like, even when I taught adult English language learners, we used to do games so much in the classroom and they enjoyed it. Everybody would be like, you're taking these things to the class? These are adults. They still enjoy it. They come to your class because they want to do something enriching, something that is not, they're already working in, very demanding jobs outside the classroom, and they just want to be in your classroom to kind of de-stress and just do something, engage in something more light and fun, but at the same time it's beneficial for them as professionals. So I hope this answered your question.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Salma. Okay.
Any other questions before we move on?
Another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you have explained about a SMART objective, yeah. Okay, with component of specific, measurable, attainable, result-based, time-bound, and equitable. My question is, do we need to put all the components into the formulation of our learning objective?
So I'm gonna show you some objectives. You don't have to put all the components, but you have to put these components in mind while you're writing the object.
Okay.
So for specific, yes, you have to put that in the formatting, the writing itself, the specific, measurable, result-based, maybe not. Time-bound, yes. So I would say specific, measurable, time-bound have to be there in the writing, but attainable, result-based, and equitable, this is something that is going to be in your mind as you're writing the object. Okay, and we're going to look at some objectives in a minute, so you would get an idea about that, what that means.
Okay, thank you. I think
Problem.
another participant will question. Bu Aziza.
Yes, I'm Siti Asisa from UIN Makassar. My question is about the instructional components. Why you only mention about 3 components, that is objective, activity, assessment. What about like the content and methods? Where did you put? Thank you. Thank you.
So I feel like the content I feel like the content is kind of implicit in the objective. It's included in the objective, and the methods is kind of like in the activities. But yeah, that's my. So I'm not saying content and methods are not there. I'm just talking about writing the lesson plan itself. These are the ideas that you're going to keep in mind. The activities means what strategies and methods you're using, right? So it can be actually, instead of activities, we can just call it methods or strategies. And instead of objective, it means what's the instructional content or the content knowledge that I want to deliver to my students. So I feel like, as I said, these two components are included in activities and in objectives. Okay? I hope
Thank
this
you.
answered your
Thank
question.
you.
No problem. No problem. Okay. Any more questions before we move on? I like the questions. The questions are great. Okay, so another way of looking at it, if you Google SMART objectives, you will find graphs like this. Specific, state what you would do, use action words. Measurable, provide a way to evaluate, use metrics or data. Targets, achievable, within your scope. So we said attainable, achievable is the same thing, right? It's just a different word of saying it. We said relevant, we said result based. Another way of looking at it is relevant, making sense within your job function, improves the business or the education in some way. So how is it related to what the students are already doing? Is it connected to the curriculum that you're teaching or not? Because sometimes we feel like we're so tempted to teach specific topics because they're nice in English language, but are they really related to what the students are already doing? And is it going to add to their knowledge and understanding of the language or not? So we can think about the R as result based or relevant. Both of them would work. And the last one is time bound. State when you will get it done and be specific with your time frame. I see some chat here, so I'm assuming we have questions. No, that was okay. Okay, think somebody raised their hand. So whoever raised their hand, I can't see everyone because I have screen share, but whoever raised their hand, they can ask the question. Anybody who has their hand raised?
Hello, Naifa.
Yes.
Naifa.
Okay, I want to ask, what difficulties did you encounter in the learning process, and what was the role of the teacher in overcoming this? About the topic.
Okay, so difficulties, there is, as I said, there is a lot of difficulties, but the biggest difficulty would be most of me myself when I was a new teacher, and then the teachers that I work with and train right now. I think one of the most difficult parts of teaching is knowing exactly what goal you want to achieve and how to write that and know how to assess that in the end. So I feel like if you don't have a strong goal, your lesson is not going to be well structured and coherent. And then another problem is many times I feel like people teach, like we learn so much about communicative language teaching and how fun it is, and that we want our classrooms to be interactive and include so many fun activities for the students. But many times we do not link these fun activities to our overall goal. So the activities are just fun, but they do not really serve any purpose. And I want to make sure that my activities really serve a purpose. Do I want to do a debate in class because it's fun? Or do I want to do a debate in class because it improves my students' speaking skills? Or because it improves the kind of language the students select when they're agreeing or disagreeing with each other, for example. So For each fun activity that I'm picking, I want to make sure that it's serving a purpose and it's connected very clearly to my objectives. And that's one struggle that I see all the time and that I personally struggled with when I was a new teacher. Just keeping in mind that, okay, yes, I know it's nice, it's fun, we can play games, but do the games really help the students achieve anything related to what I'm doing? And like, the standards and the goals that I have, is it part of the curriculum? Is it part of what the Ministry of Education is requiring me, for example, to do with my students or not? So as a teacher, I have to always think about my objectives and my goals as in the beginning. Another challenge, of course, is there is so many challenges. As I said, having students who do not speak English sometimes new students coming in the middle and they're not at the same level of everybody else, and then you have to do a lot of differentiation. Motivation is a big issue. Some students are not motivated to learn English at all. And this happens especially in the college level when the students are studying something like engineering, for example, and they just have to take English class because it's part of their curriculum in college. They feel like, okay, English class is not important. It's not important as engineering. How do you keep your students motivated? And then here comes the idea of making content interesting for your students, picking topics that are related to their field, showing them that English is important for them to succeed in the future, related to their career in the future. So instead of, for example, asking the students to write something like an argumentative essay, which is something that engineering students do not need, why don't I ask them to write like a science report, for example, or like a memo to a manager, or like an email explaining an innovative idea, something related more to their field. So I have to think outside the box, not because my administration wants me to teach them how to write essay. It has to be argumentative essay. No, I have to link it to their interest and to their experience. If they have to read, they don't have to read about pollution, for example, or to have to be healthy or unhealthy food. Why can't they read about science discoveries in engineering, for example? Something that is more appealing to their interest as learners, especially now because our students and you guys also very young, different experiences, so much exposure to the world. We live in a world now where everybody is so interconnected and related to each other. We have to really make sure we work harder to make our materials and our content very interesting for our students. So that's another thing, motivation. Another area that I found challenge with would be something like I had for example, I taught in Egypt for some time, and many of my students were not accustomed to interactive activities. They want lecture. And then when you start doing interactive and group work, they have so much resistance. They don't like it. So you have to show them the benefit of working collaboratively. And research in second language learning says that benefit is not only something that comes from listening to the teacher, it also comes from listening to your classmates. Because when you're talking to your classmates, you are trying to figure out how to say things in English and how to make it correct. So this kind of thinking and negotiation of meaning, they call it, helps you to become a better language learner. So it's very important to also keep talking and doing this kind of group work in class. Some students, I don't know how it is in Indonesia, but I know, for example, in many of the Arab countries, the students are not accustomed to group work. They don't like it, but you have to kind of be very assertive and do whatever is best for your students and just explain to them why it's important. So these are some of the issues. There is more issues, but we can talk about it later if you want. I don't want to spend the entire presentation talking about issues because it's going to kind of worry you more about teaching, and teaching is not worrying. Teaching is actually fun. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, no problem. Okay, so these are the objectives. And now what I have here for us to do is I actually put together some objectives, and I want you to tell me if you think they're good objectives or they need work. So this is like an activity for us. So I'm going to read each objective, and I want a person to tell me if they think it's good or not and how we can improve it. And I'm going to put a tick mark next to it so that you would be able to, let me see, how can I annotate? I'm not seeing the annotation here. I'm not seeing that, but it's okay. Let's read the first one. Students will understand the names of fruits in English. What do you think about that? Is it smart or not? And if it's not smart, you have to tell me why it's not smart.
No.
I don't think that's smart. I don't think so.
Okay, why is it not smart?
Because it's not measurable. Understand is not measurable to, yeah.
Okay, yes. So the first thing, I totally agree with you. The first part of it is that students will understand, and understand is not measurable. What else? It's not, to me also, it's not very specific, correct? I don't know what
Yeah.
fruits you're talking about. How many fruits? All the fruits, there are like 100 of fruits, maybe. Are they going to learn 100 words in one class? So why not be very specific? And what else? Iqbal.
Wait.
Or maybe you can tell me how we can improve it.
Maybe it can be more specific, like student can mention some of fruits, maybe like that.
Okay, students can mention how many? What did you say? I didn't hear that piece.
Like 5 or 10 name of fruits, something like that.
Okay, so we can say something like, by the end of the lesson, students will be able
Yeah.
to identify. Identify means tell me the name. Identify the names of 5 fruits in English
Yes.
using pictures.
Yeah.
So now it's time bound by the end of the lesson. It's specific, it's measurable, it's result based, and it's attainable because it's 5, it's not 100. And I know how they're going to be doing that, the assessment piece, which is they're going to look at pictures and they're going to name the fruits. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much. Let's do the second one. Students will correctly use is and are to complete a fill in the blanks activity independently. What do you guys think? Good or not good? Any volunteers? There is no correct, like, this is not, anybody can volunteer, even if your answer is, you're not sure about your answer, because this is a discussion. So how do you feel about it? This one is kind of tricky a little bit, right?
Yeah, that is
What
why
do you-
I a little bit confused about this.
Why are you confused about it?
Because it's tricky, like correctly used, it can be measurable, it can be not.
Okay,
I think.
so I feel like it's not bad, right? It's
Yeah.
not bad because I know what I want my students to achieve. Um, but I can add more details if I want. So I can say, by the end of the lesson, students will correctly use is and are to complete a fill in the blanks about something independently or using a worksheet. It's not bad. Independently is showing me how they're going to be achieving that. So the attainability, the kind of assessment. Use as an R is specific and it's
Yeah.
measurable, and it's result based. It means I will have a handout in the end and I'll be able to correct the responses. So I'm going to have some evidence about their learning. So it's something attainable. I can achieve it at the end of the class.
Right.
Okay, let's move to the next one, which is by the end of the lesson, the students will write an essay in English. Do I have any new volunteers for that one? Come on, we're 220 people. How do you feel about this one?
I thought that it was okay, but not specific.
I agree. Very good. So it's okay, but it's not specific. How can we make it more specific? Any idea how we can make it more specific?
About the topic, maybe, of essay.
Okay, maybe the topic, or maybe not write an essay, because I don't know, you guys are English language learners as well. Do you feel like you can learn how to write an essay in one class?
No.
No,
No.
right? So first you have to learn how to write a thesis statement or a topic sentence, and then you have to learn about how to write an introduction. They spend so much time writing the introduction, and then you have to learn how to write the body paragraph, and in the body paragraph you have to learn how to use conjunctions, which is but, and, in order to, all these words. And then afterwards you learn how to write a conclusion. So there are so many components, not only about the structure, but also about the grammar and the vocabulary that you use in an essay. So I feel like it's a very big topic and it needs to be smaller. So maybe we can say by the end of this lesson, students will, anybody can give me a more specific way of writing this objective? Yes, no, not sure. Okay, so I would say at the end, by the end of the lesson, students will write maybe students will be able to depends. Maybe students will write uh, a well-structured thesis statement for the body paragraph of an essay, or by the end of this lesson, students will be able to use conjunctions such as and, or, but correctly to connect 3 sentences in an essay. Something like that, just to make it super specific and to focus on very specific areas. It can be focusing on grammar, or as I said, it can focus on the structure. Okay? It's just
Yes.
what I'm trying to get you to understand is that writing an essay is something very big. It's a goal, but it's not an objective. Okay, and then the last one is, by the end of the lesson, students will use travel-related vocabulary taught in class to write a paragraph using the sentence starter. I enjoyed my summer because. Smart or not smart?
It's smart.
I agree. Why is it smart?
Because the students get more about new vocabulary and understand about the lessons for the day.
Okay, I agree. So the students will, it's very specific. They will use travel-related vocabulary, so it's very specific. Taught in class, which means I know exactly how many. It's not 100, maybe 4 or 5. To write a paragraph, I know exactly, I can assess the writing. Using the sentence starter, it's going to show me how I'm going to attain that and how am I going to grade it in the end. So it's attainable and it's time bound as well. So time bound, specific, measurable, attainable, and you have a sentence starter there, which is I enjoyed my summer because, which can also, you can also make the case that this is equitable because it can provide extra assistance for some students. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is here an example of actually a lesson plan from one of my students. She was learning how to write, develop a lesson plan to teach English to her students. And these are her objectives. Let's look at her objectives and you tell me if her objectives are okay or we have to develop them. The first one is students will be able to explain what someone is doing using present continuous. And the second one is students will be able to understand the difference between present continuous and present simple. Yes, ask me. I see your hands. Ask me. Am I saying your name correct? Okay, I think Asmi is not answering. So if anybody else would like to volunteer, you can go ahead. Tell me what you think about these objectives. Anyone? Any volunteers? Okay, let's focus on the first one. Students will be able to explain what someone is doing using present continuous. Do you like it, or do you think you need to add something to it?
I think that makes sense, but we need to add something.
Like what?
Wait. You know, wait, I don't know. Wait, let me think first. Student will be able to explain what someone is doing. Using present continuous.
Okay. I'm gonna give you guys one more minute and then I will tell you my suggestion. So if anybody wants to give it a try, go ahead. Okay, so my suggestion is maybe we can say something like, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to use present continuous to write about or to describe, verbally describe the action that somebody is doing using pictures. I did, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm not being, maybe because I'm not the host, I'm not being given the option to use the annotation. So I'm trying to write that on the screen, but okay, let's see. Okay, that's okay. So I'm gonna repeat it again. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to use present continuous to write about or to explain by speaking what somebody is doing using pictures or action cards. Okay, so by the end of the lesson is time bound. Students will be able to use something to write about something is specific. Even use something to verbally explain or to discuss or to present is something that is specific. Using pictures is how it's attainable and how I'm going to assess it. Iqbal, you were speaking. Do you like that one, or you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
happy that you agree, but if you have any suggestions, you're always welcome to chime in and tell me what you think. Also, one thing that I always suggest, especially if you're teaching any vocabulary or grammar, is that you always start your objective by showing that first. I'm gonna type it in the chat for you guys because I'm not able to write on the screen, but you can so you would always say students will be able to, which is SWBAT. I'm writing that in the chat. Students will be able to use something. So you're going to put the grammar and the vocabulary.
Yes, I have.
To do something. Do you see that in the chat? I just sent it to everyone. So students will be able to use something. So for example, use present tense, use past tense, use is an R, using travel vocabulary, using food vocabulary to do something. What is to present, to write about, to speak about, to discuss, to summarize, to explain, to identify. Okay? That is one way that makes it easier for you to write your objective. Think about what you want them to use and how they want to use it. I just sent that to everybody on the chat, so you would have that as a note. And then the second one is students will be able to understand the difference between present continuous and present tense. I think again we said understand is very unattainable and unspecific and unmeasurable. So we don't want to use understand, but what we can say is students will be able to distinguish or differentiate between present continuous and present simple using picture cards or something like that. That would make it more specific.
If I want to ask something, can I?
For sure, go ahead.
If the understand word we change it like mention, is it possible?
Sorry,
So the student will be able. So the student will
Uh-huh.
be able to mention the difference between present continuous and present simple.
Yes, mention is okay because mention means speak about or explain. So that's
Yeah.
fine because you can assess the explaining and you can
Yeah.
assess the mentioning, which is the identification, but you cannot really assess the understanding, which is a big concept. Mentioning means you can see them saying it, so you'll be able to say in your mind, see
They
who's
understand it.
achieving. Yes. So it's one mentioning is one way of showing understanding. You see what I'm yeah. Well, understanding something very big. So show me how they understand by mentioning, by describing, by explaining, etc. Okay. So let's move on and it's your turn now. So I have these topics here and it's already 1 hour past an hour presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask a new volunteer if you want to pick one topic and tell me one objective about that topic. So the topics are going to college using should and must, recipes using sequence words like first, second, third, then last, summer vacation using past tense, at the supermarket using food vocabulary, and making travel plans using WH questions. Anybody would like to pick a topic and make a quick attempt at writing an objective for that topic? Please. Just this is my assessment. I want to make sure I assess you before I move on. Anybody? Please. One person? No?
Kayak sedikit, Bu. Bu. Kayak sedikit. Sanduk.
Nadila. Okay, I don't think Nadila is there. Do we have anybody else who would like to volunteer?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I?
Of course. Can we Sister City, Taria, can we mute Nadila? I think because I can hear very well.
Yeah, hello Pak David. Can you mute it? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Chandra.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. Okay, I will pick summer vacation. So what the smart objective by the summer vacation? So I think student can be able to explain about what their experience in the summer vacations, and then the students can explain about where they have going in that vacation. So it's the smart objective by the summer vacation. That's like that maybe.
Yeah, I like that. I would help you a little bit with that. So we can say by the end of the lesson, students will be able to use past tense because this is what I want them to do. Use past tense to explain what they did in their summer vacation. Correct? Sandra?
Sorry, can you repeat again? Because
Yeah,
I have some trouble with my connection here.
no problem. So I would say by the end of the lesson, students will be able to use past tense, simple past tense to write about maybe, or to explain. So write about is writing, or explain, which can be by presentation, or to present what they did in their summer vacation. Using,
So
you like that?
So the student maybe can make a paragraph about their summer vacation with using past tense. So, you know, if you're talking about the past experience in the summer vacation, so the student must be using the past tenses like that, maybe.
I agree with you. Very good. So yes, so by the end of the lesson, students will use the past tense to write a paragraph about their summer vacation.
Maybe like that. Thank you.
Very simple. So you see, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to use something which is past tense to do something which is to write about their summer vacation. Using something. So you can say using a model. Maybe you can provide them with a sample, or following a sample, or by following a sample, or by completing a graph, something like that. You can just say how you're going to do that, because when you add this little bit of detail, you're showing us how you're going to attain it and how you're going to assess it. So by the end of the lesson, just to take it a step further, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to use the past tense to write a paragraph about their summer by following a model provided by the teacher. Okay? Or by completing a graphic organizer or a handout provided by the teacher. Or by responding to the prompt, my summer was interesting because, something like that. Just providing that extra piece in the end helps me make the objective more attainable.
Okay, that's right. Okay, thank you.
And you have, I think, Dr. Siti Tarwiya, she has the presentation, so you can share it with them. He has the other topics as well, so that can be like a brain exercise for you. You can think about how to make objectives for the other objectives, for the other topics as well. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, we are going to share the materials, by the end of this session.
Okay, that's very good. So now we're done with objectives. And as I said, objectives is something that is very, very important, and it's the core of the lesson. And I can actually spend an entire lecture just talking about objectives, but because we're talking about the essential components, I want to focus on another component, which is goal-based communicative activities. Anybody has any questions before I move on to activities? Questions about activities. If it's a general question about teaching, we can maybe keep it till the end. But if you have any specific question about objectives, you can ask it to me now. If not, we can move on. Move on?
Move on.
Okay, great. Okay, that's very, very good, because it shows me that you guys understand what a SMART objective is and how to write a SMART objective. And just keep these principles that we discussed in mind as you're writing your objectives, and you have the information on the slides. So you can use the other topics I provided, as I mentioned, to do it as an exercise to develop your skills in writing a better objective when you're planning your lesson. So goal-based communicative activities, remember the triangle: objectives, assessment, and activities. The second one is activities. What's the meaning of communicative activities? I don't know which part you are in your program, and if you have learned about communicative language teaching or not. Maybe it's a mixed group. I'm assuming it's a mixed group because it's 200 students and faculty members. So some of you might know what communicative activities are, and the idea might be new for other people. So I included a little definition here, a brief definition. So communicative language teaching, or CLT, is a modern language teaching approach that puts emphasis on teaching languages holistically. So you want to make sure that you're teaching the 4 skills at the same time, holistic language teaching. You're not just focusing on grammar or vocabulary, you're teaching everything together. Languages are not only learned as skills, but they're also learned as a social behavior. So you're doing these tasks because you're helping the students communicate in the real world. And that's why your activities in the class have to be as similar to activities that as similar to situations that your students might encounter outside the classroom as possible. That's why you include things like role plays, games, debates, discussions, because they help the students develop the skills that they need to transfer and be outside the classroom and be successful communicator of the language outside the classroom. And we also discussed why it's important to work in pairs and in groups, because students do not only learn by listening to their teachers, but they also learn by talking to each other and being in groups, constructivist approach. If you at some point of your program you learn about second language acquisition and how languages are learned, there is a theory of constructivist language learning, which says that you learn so much by communicating and interacting with people, because as I said, this input that you get from others helps you think about the language, and it develops your capacities and skills of language as a language learner. So communicative language teaching, as I said, 4 skills, holistic, real life situations, lots of activities. So I want to make sure that I include this in my lesson plan. And I summarize this a little bit for you. What are the features of CLT? Use of authentic materials. Students engage in real communication with one another. Material is always presented in context. So you're not just going to say, okay, today I'm going to teach them the past tense and just go and teach them the grammar like how they used to do in the old days, because this is not communicative at all. And it has proven over time that it's not as effective. You want to make sure it's done in a context. So if I want to do past tense, I can do it in the context of what happened in the summer, the history of Indonesia, something that happened in World War II, the history of Hajj, for example, something like that, something that is meaningful, something that the students can relate to, a context. Context is very important, very, very, very important in language teaching. And you have to pay attention to register and style. So it means appropriateness of the language and how languages are used in a social context, because you're doing a lot of social work with a language. You're not only teaching language as is, we said, but you're also teaching students to be able to use it outside the class. So students need to know what's appropriate to say, what's not appropriate. There are cultural differences too. So for example, even if you, like for example, I'll give you an example. How you use should and must in English, which are modal verbs, we call them modal verbs. They're used in English in a certain way, but you have students who come from other cultures who might not feel comfortable using them in these contexts because they're not appropriate in their culture. For example, Japanese students who tend to be more shy do not like to use the word must because it's very authoritative. So they use should more. So there are these cultural differences. You want to teach these cultural differences to the students and tell them that it's okay to use these words in English because language and culture is the same thing. And you want to make sure that you are as close to the culture as possible, and it's appropriate in English to use must. Even though it's not, for example, appropriate in your own personal culture, it's okay to use it in English. And by creating these realistic situations or context, you're helping the students realize and understand that I can use these particular forms and expressions in a language and it would be okay. Fluency and accuracy, you're not only focusing on helping the students be accurate, but you also want the students to be fluent. And you are helping the students become fluent by creating authentic situations where the students are communicating outside the classroom. And these situations are very similar to what they would encounter outside the classroom, like For example, ordering food or talking on the phone. These are skills that students need to learn because they use these skills a lot outside the classroom, and you want to make sure they're comfortable doing that by practicing these skills with them in the classroom. And you want to make sure you develop autonomous learners. By saying autonomous learners, it means you want your students to be students who are not only waiting for their teachers to tell them what to do and how to learn, but you want them to be very motivated. Their aptitude in learning languages is very high, so that they would be excited to seek knowledge by themselves and ask questions and uh, just teach themselves the language. And there are so many ways we can learn languages these days. It's not like in the past where we're only limited to what we learn in school. There is so many resources now online and multimedia resources and so many online and offline resources that you as a learner can use and that you can guide your students to, so that they would use these resources by themselves as well. So keep all these principles in mind when you're planning your activities in the classroom. So how do I begin? I feel like I presented so much information to you now. So I wanted to put everything in steps for you so that you would know where to begin as a teacher. The first thing you need to do is aligning your objectives to your activities. What's the meaning of aligning? Means make sure that they go hand in hand. So my objective is this, and my activity has to make sure that my activity has to be aligned to the objective so that it helps me achieve the objective. So my objective is for the students to be able to use the past tense, for example, to write about their summer experience. Great. What activities are you going to use in class? Maybe watch a clip about summer vacation and share your experience as a teacher with them. And then maybe have them work in groups and discuss their summer vacations with one another before they sit and write their paragraphs. But if you pick something like summer vacation and then you go and play a game with them about something else, it's communicative, but it's not aligned with the objective. You want to make sure it's always aligned. Plan a strong and engaging introduction.
Okay.
So
Baik.
hello? Is anybody asking a question? No? No? Okay. So the second thing is planning a strong and engaging introduction. And I think Siti Aziza, was it? They asked me the question about methodology. Here's the methodology. I want to make sure that my introduction is a strong introduction. I start my class always strong by grabbing the attention of my students, by activating their prior knowledge, by connecting the new content that I'm going to teach today to something that they already know about in the past, by making sure that they're interested in what I'm going to be teaching them. Make sure that you always start with a presentation of new ideas and concepts, and then you model how to use it to your students, and do not skip modeling. What's the meaning of that? It means, okay, so I did the strong introduction, but then I have to show the students what I want them to do. I'm teaching them about past tense. I'm going to put past tense in a context. So I'm going to show them, for example, write a few sentences about my own summer vacation, read it and discuss it with them, and then highlight the past tense in it, and then ask them to write their own, share their own ideas about what they did in the summer vacation and write it on the board as well. So I'm doing a presentation about summer vacation using the past tense, but I'm using examples and I'm using context. So I'm not just teaching past tense, I'm teaching it in context. And the students are watching me and listening to me and participating. So they know exactly how they use that on their own. And then I'm modeling. What's the meaning of modeling? I'm giving them examples. So everyone, when you go back to your groups now, I want you to discuss with each other, and I want you to give each other 2 sentences using the past tense like this. And then you show them. Last summer, I went to the beach with my family and we had so much fun. Last summer, we went to the waterfalls and it was very beautiful and relaxing, and we played so much board games as a family. So I give them my sentences, and then they know exactly when they go back to their groups what they're going to do. So then the next step they have to do is they go to the groups and practice. And then afterwards, you have everybody share in class. Select your materials carefully, use authentic materials. And this is something that we're going to be talking more in depth about next week. Make sure you integrate the 4 skills as much as you can. So your class is not only, yes, you can focus on one skill like listening sometimes more or speaking more, but each language class should have the 4 skills always, with different levels. So 4 skills, but today the focus is more on reading, but there is a little bit of speaking and writing and listening. Tomorrow there is a focus on listening, but there is a little bit of everything else. And plan activities that are natural, realistic, and communicative. Do not plan forced activities or things that are not realistic. Like, how often are students in Indonesia going to go skiing, for example? It's not a very common experience in Indonesia. It's not realistic. Do they need to learn that? No. But maybe it can be something about something that they would encounter outside the classroom. Bring examples from your local culture and your local community and make it something that is interesting and appealing for the level of your students. Okay? And I summarize this again in a different model for you. Everything that I discussed in a model called the I do, we do, you do. And this is something that we use so much in language teaching. I do means I give, after I do my introduction, I do direct instruction, teach them the new material, and model it by thinking aloud. Okay, so this is what you're going to do in your groups. You give them the examples. You can write it down for them so they know exactly what they do when they go into groups. We do, you do it with the students. Okay, so and so, what did you do last summer? You listen to them. What about you? What did you do last summer? And as they're giving me their answers, I'm giving them feedback and correcting their answers. And then you do, which means now you go in your groups and you work together. And I'm going to walk around and listen to you, and I'm going to provide feedback to you if needed. And then the last one is you do by yourself. So you just write something and present it to everybody in class. And the you do, the last you do here is the assessment, how you're going to attain it. And this is what in the lesson going to help you determine if your students achieve your objective or they did not achieve your objective. Okay? That's too much information now, right? So I'm going to stop and ask people to give me any comments, ideas, questions that they have before we move on. Questions? Questions?
Okay, I have
Suggestions?
questions.
Yes,
Can I, Miss?
of course.
Okay, can you back to the before the last slide?
Yes. And who is talking? Sorry, because I can't see your name.
My name is Chandra. I'm from Islamic Institute of Stage, Palopo. Okay. Actually, I'm interesting with plan a strong and engaging introduction. You know, it's here about the first impression about the meeting in the class. So, for example, if I to be a new student in the class, so can you give tips to us how about make first impression to the students? If the student is very smart student, so sometimes as a new student we think the students is more smart by us. So how your tips to this situation can you give us?
So your question is how do you what are some examples of strong introductions? Is this the question?
Just like that.
Uh-huh. So the strong introduction has to be something that, so different purposes, you can think about it in different purposes. Sometimes they call it an attention grabber. Sometimes they call it activation of prior knowledge. So whatever you want to do, if you want to grab their attention, you can do something. It doesn't have to really be related to the lesson so much, but it can be something fun. Like it can be something like a game, or stand up and uh, talk to each other and put yourself in the order of uh, your birth dates, for example. So whoever is born in January should stand there, whoever is born in December should stand there, and everybody else in the middle, you have to figure out where to go, something like that. So this is just a fun activity, can be like a nice way of starting your semester. First class students students are actually forced to go speak to each other and just communicate with each other and get to know each other. Here's one activity. Another activity just to grab their attention is I use like a little ball, like you know how we have stress balls. I would get these stress balls and I would just randomly throw it to somebody and ask them to say two things that are true about themselves and one thing that is not true about themselves. And everybody else has to figure out what's true and what's not true. And then the person has to randomly pick somebody else and throw it to them. So everybody is anticipating who the ball is going to go to. So these are like just fun activities to start the lesson. So that's if you only want to do attention grabber. But if you want to link it to your content, I'm going to go back to the idea of the past tense and talking about what you did last summer. And I would say the topic about what you did last summer, maybe you can bring pictures of your summer vacation and put it like on your screen and discuss with them what you did in the summer. So using pictures, maybe using a video about different beautiful spots to visit in Indonesia in the summer, something like that. So this way you're kind of building their background that today you're introducing the new lesson that today we're going to be talking about vacation. You know what vacation is? Let's watch some pictures, let's watch some videos, and then okay, so vacation, what did you do last summer? And then you can take it from there. So again, it depends on, do you just want to start by doing something fun and get everybody in the mood of learning, or do you want to link it to your lesson? And you can do either way. Okay, Chandra?
Okay, it's very interesting. So it's very
Yeah.
impression. Thank you so much. I will follow your suggestion for today.
No problem.
you.
And if you are here next week and we're talking about materials and stuff like that, we can also talk more about introductions and conclusions, because I think every lesson has to have a very strong introduction and a very good conclusion, because everybody always remembers the beginning and the ending, right? We always
Yeah.
remember how something started and the middle is always a gray area, but the beginning and the end is always what people remember. And that's why I want to give a very good impression in the beginning. Okay. So we do, you do. Keep this in mind. Very easy. Print it and put it in your office, future office, inshallah. And then you can watch it and think, okay, I do means I have to always do a presentation. And I have to always do it. Presentation doesn't have to be long. It can be 5 minutes. And again, the presentation has to be in context. Model, it means I show the students how they can use the new content by themselves. We do means I practice with them by asking them questions, writing their answers on the board so everybody can see, make a connection between what they hear and what they see. And this is something I also want you to keep in mind. Do not assume that by saying something, students will get it. Sometimes they have to see it too. So even when I was teaching English language learners, I used to always, whenever they give me examples, I used to write it on the board so they can see. And if they make mistakes, I correct it and I write the correct form on the board so they can see that, you know, how to say something in a target-like form. We do, and then you do your practice by yourselves, maybe individually or maybe in small groups or maybe in a big group, and I will monitor you. And then finally you do the other one, which is an assessment in the end. Another reminder that I want you to keep in mind is that you have to always appeal to the interests of your students, and you have to design activities that are culturally appropriate and the students can relate to. So you don't want to bring examples from cultures that are not appropriate, or cultures that the experiences or examples that your students cannot really connect with. Like, why would you teach students in Saudi Arabia, for example, about snowman. They cannot relate to this idea. It's desert. Why would you teach them about the snow? Pick something that is more fun for them, something that is related to their culture and their community and environment, so that the students can make these connections and find it relevant. And when they find it relevant, they find it more meaningful and they want to learn more about it because it's connected to who they are as humans. So making these human connections are very, very important. Sometimes when we are given books by our departments, our department says, okay, you're teaching this curriculum, it's from the United States or from Britain. But then you open the curriculum and you see all these examples, and the examples are like, oh my God, my students will not know about football, American football, because they never played football before. Why don't I focus on maybe this lesson instead of focusing on American football, which is okay to learn about, but not all, like you don't want the entire unit to be about American football. It can be sports around the world, and I can include the sport from my country because students are going to be very enthusiastic to talk about something that they love in their culture, and it will help them more to discuss the language and speak about the language. And then this is the same lesson that we watched earlier with an objective. This is the activities that the teacher had. So I don't know if you guys think anything needs to be fixed or it's okay. So the first thing she did, I think it was a she, not a he, and it was a Japanese student teaching English. And the first thing she wanted to do is she got paper strips and she asked the students to pick a paper and act the situation. Oh, the warm-up, which is the introduction. She asked students to match sentences with pictures because she wanted the warm-up to be related to the lesson. So she asked the students to work in two groups, like in groups of two pairs and match. So that was her warm-up activity. For her first activity, she had strips of paper with sentences and she asked the students to act. And by acting, the students learned about present continuous. He's eating, he's sleeping, he's walking, he's jumping. And then every time they were acting, she was writing the sentences on the board. And then from these sentences, this is the context, she taught them about present continuous. And then from the same sentences, she asked them, okay, what's the difference? You're saying that he's sleeping. What about if I say he sleeps at 9 o'clock? What's the difference? Why am I saying he's sleeping? And when do I use he sleeps at 9 o'clock? Anybody knows the difference? So she asked them that question. And then they were able to understand from the examples that, present continuous means the person is doing it right now. But present tense means the person does it every day. It's part of the routine. And then afterwards, what she did was that she asked the students to work in small groups and describe pictures using present continuous and present tense. So that was the you do, and she was watching them and giving them feedback. And then for the last you do, which is the assessment, she asked the students to complete a worksheet by themselves or in pairs and share the answer with everybody in class using present continuous. So you see how she started with an introduction, a strong introduction. It can be stronger if you want. There's just an example. And then she started with presentation and modeling by taking the examples and explaining and then telling them the difference. And then the students worked in pairs and she monitored them and gave them feedback. She watched them. And then the students worked alone, and that was the assessment. The second part of the you do. So it's your turn now. And this time I want you to pick a topic. Maybe we can just continue working on summer vacation since we started it. And I think we're running out of time and I want to make sure we have some time for questions in the end. Summer vacation using past tense. Can anybody think about a strong introduction? And can anybody think about an activity to do in the middle of the lesson? Strong introduction. Any volunteers? Any volunteers here for me? Yes, no, not sure. No? Okay, so I am going to give you an example then for, okay. So I'm gonna pick a different topic, which is recipes. And for my introduction activity, we're going to watch a very short clip about a cooking show and watch it one time and then watch it the second time and ask the students to notice how the person is giving the directions or the steps for cooking. So that will be my introduction. Now I'm going to, whatever they tell me, I'm going to write the examples on the board. So how is she giving these instructions? Oh, she's using words like first and second. Who can remember what she did first? And then I will write first, she put onions. Second, okay, who can tell me what she did second? And whatever they tell me, I write it on the board. And then I have a list of all these instructions on the board, the steps for cooking some kind of food. Now, okay, so let's look at these words together. What do you guys think these words are called? Ah, yes, correct. They're called sequence words. Why are they called sequence words? Because they tell us the steps of doing something. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I'm going to make a smoothie or a juice. And then you as a teacher are going to show them. First, I put the strawberries. Second, I put so and so. Then I blend it. Then I enjoy. I drink it. So when you go in your groups, I want you to share a recipe with each other and write down the steps of making a recipe using these words, first, second, third. So they go and you go and watch them. And then afterwards, the final product can be each person writing a recipe about their favorite food. So you see how the sequence is? Strong introduction, a video, and then taking the responses from the students, the context, introducing the vocabulary or the grammar in context, which is the sequence words, modeling what they have to do when they go in their groups, and then having the students work, watch the students, and then asking the students to work independently in the end so that I can have information about their learning. When they write their own recipe in the end, and they write the steps first, second, third, etc., I'm going to collect this paper in the end and I'm going to grade it or correct it or evaluate it after the class and check, Ahmed did very well. Samia needs some more work. Aziza needs a little bit more work on this. So tomorrow in my class, I'm going to try to make these changes. I'm going to focus more on the areas where I feel my students need more work. And that goes back to what we said earlier about developing a reflective mindset, becoming a reflective person, which means that assessment and evaluation is not only for my students, but it's also for me as a teacher to see if I'm teaching effectively or not. Part of developing excellence as a teacher is always being a reflective teacher, always thinking about what you did and thinking about ways you can improve it. And the last thing, any questions so far? I wanted everybody to just do a stretching. I'm going to give you 1 minute, not 2 minutes, to just stretch if you want, because we've been sitting for a long time. So just take a minute and relax and stretch your arms. And if you have any questions, you can ask me your questions. Questions so far? Okay.
Yes, please.
If you do, yes, go ahead. And the rest of you can do a stretching, okay?
Okay, thank you for your...
Who is talking? Is that Chandra?
No.
Who's that? I don't see the name. I'm sorry. I because I have my screen shared, so I don't.
Okay. My name is Sohail Hamdani, and you can call me just Danny. Okay.
Okay.
So to make it easy to call me just Danny.
Okay.
Okay. This is out of the topic actually, but I have a question that make me curious about this. So I'm an English learner actually, but I'm always thinking what I'm speaking about the grammar rules when I spoke the others. And can you give us a recommendation to solve this problem? I mean, like we can speak fluently and can be understood by others.
So you're asking for advice for your English language learners like yourself, and how you can not be worried so much about grammar and become more fluent speaking English, correct?
Yes, as you can see, this is the toughest part in English skills, including writing and reading and so on.
Okay, so my advice to you would be to speak more. I know everybody says that. I was an English language learner too, and I learned English later in my life, not really from the day I was born or anything. I am a native Arabic speaker, so I was speaking Arabic most of the time with my family and at school, and then I always wanted to learn English. I was always, as I said, a global citizen, always wanting to learn about the world. And so that's how I was motivated to learn English. And I think it's very, very important to keep practicing and keep speaking. But I don't want you to think so much about grammar when you're speaking, because if you keep thinking about it so much, it's going to intimidate you and stop you. You're going to be pausing so much to think about what to use and stuff like that. The best way is to speak to native speakers so that they can give you feedback and correct you. And I think we make a big deal in non-English speaking countries about fluency, but believe me, if you live in America and if you live in any country where English is the native language, people are very understanding and people don't make a big deal about these little mistakes. You just have to speak more and develop your confidence. Believe me, this is the best way. Listen more to English news, watch the news and stuff like that. Watch documentaries. And also, whenever you have native speakers at work, or not even native speakers, Indonesians who speak English fluently, ask them to converse with you. Ask them to speak with you, because these conversations really build your confidence, and it helps you practice. And sometimes you just need that practice in order to become a better speaker. So I would say the first thing is lower your fear and anxiety. Don't think about it so much. The second thing I would say, listen to as much English media as you can. And the last thing I would say is, and it's very important, is speak to native speakers of the language. Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's move on, because I think everybody did their stretch and we have 15 minutes left. So the last thing is ending a lesson. And how? Ideas. I think we said we have to make sure we have a very, very strong conclusion. Just we have a very strong introduction. We want to make sure that we also have a very strong conclusion. So I always say, end strong. Walk away with evidence of your students' learning. End strong. Make sure that you walk away with evidence of your students' learning, because if you don't have that evidence, then you have no idea if the students learned or not your lesson. So you want to make sure that you speak, they say something, you listen to them, they write something, you collect that information and you grade it and evaluate it. Even if it's not really a grade, you don't really want to give them a grade for everything, because they will be worried about that. Just for you to look at their work and see if they're okay or not, and if they need extra help, so that you would provide the help later on. And these are some examples for you for how to end a lesson. So you did the I do, you do, we do. I do, we do, you do. and you have here some kind of worksheet or something that you're going to carry with you outside the classroom, and you're going to look at it later. But before the students end, you can also do something very quick, a quick check to make sure that the students are okay with your lesson. So you can do something that we call an exit ticket. What's the meaning of an exit ticket? Exit ticket. So it means you can't exit the classroom without giving me the ticket. So what is a ticket? A ticket is just a little slip of paper, a small piece of paper that has a question or that requires the students to do something that they did in the class. So you would say, take out a small piece of paper, or you can even give it to them and write one sentence with past tense. As you're preparing to leave the classroom, give me the paper on your way out of the classroom. Write your name on the paper and just write one sentence with past tense. So it's going to take you 1 minute to check. Oh, Ahmed did well, Abdullah did well, Fatima did well, Aziza didn't do very well, Sumaya needs more work. I know tomorrow I have to focus more on this. So that's an exit ticket. It's like a ticket that the students need to give you before they exit the classroom. Independent worksheet, you can ask them to fill out something like work on a worksheet. That can be their exit ticket too. So the you do part in the end can also be your assessment, as I said. So it can be some worksheet that they work alone. If it's not a writing class and you're focusing more on speaking and writing, you can ask them some questions. So, okay, so you guys today, you practiced telling your memories about your summer using the past tense. I'm going to call your name and I want you to tell me one sentence verbally speaking using the past tense. And then you call their names and they can just tell you. And this can be also another way of you checking their learning and understanding. Questions and answers. You can ask questions about what you taught today. You can do a whole class discussion. You can ask them to read something quickly. You just want to make sure you end the class with something solid and that you do not walk outside the classroom without getting an idea about whether or not your students learned the lesson. And it's super, super important that you always incorporate that part in the end of the lesson. The other thing I want to tell you is that you always have to have a wrap up in the end. So you can't just have the students complete their work and exit. You can say, okay, everyone, I know in the you do part, you completed your worksheets. Very good. Now let's come back together as a group for 1 minute and let's see, what did we learn today? Oh, did you find this useful or not? What do you want to learn more about tomorrow? Great. So I'm going to keep this in mind as I'm preparing for our lesson tomorrow. This kind of helps your students have some sense of closure for the class, and it reminds them of the beginning of the lesson, what's the purpose of the lesson, so that they would walk outside of the classroom and they kind of like know exactly and remember what they learned, because we said strong introductions and strong conclusions always stick to our students' minds. So we want to make sure that we always remind them of the purpose of the lesson in the beginning and in the end. And that's how my students exited her lesson. She did an exit ticket, like a ticket, and she asks students to write 2 sentences using both present continuous and present tense and give it to her before they exit the classroom. So that's one way she did it. So your turn for the summer vacation. How can you end the lesson? Or for the recipes topic? Anybody can give me an idea about an exit ticket maybe that you can do for recipes or for summer vacation? Do I have a new volunteer before we end our lesson? I would love to hear a new voice. Okay, so what I can do for the recipes, I already asked the students to write their own recipe and give it to me. So it's a worksheet, so I can take that as a form of assessment. I also, before leaving the classroom, I can ask the group to maybe do a quick sharing by everybody wrote a recipe. Tell me one step from your recipe so they can share it with each other. So this can be one way I end the lesson. For the summer vacation, what I can do is Ask everybody to write one sentence in the past tense before the exit. Speaking, if they're doing speaking, I can call names and ask them to say one sentence in the past tense, etc. And I would like you, as I said, in your free time after you finish this lecture, to try to follow the steps of activities, objectives, and assessment for the other 3 topics that you have here: at the supermarket, making travel plans, and going to college. So my wrap up now, because we're finishing. So that was our lecture today. I would like you to tell me 8 things that you learned today, 8 different people, 8 things that you learned today that make an effective and successful language lesson. Let's start with the first one. What is one thing that you learned today? That's my exit ticket. It can be different for each person. Just tell me one thing that you remember the most about today's lecture.
Make an objective.
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry?
Equal.
The smart, make an objective. Writing smart objectives. Very good. Okay,
Yes.
that's number 1. Writing smart objectives. Number 2. Anybody has something else to share? Nadia?
Yeah.
Yes,
May
go
I?
ahead. Of course.
Thank you. Triangle.
The
Perhaps.
triangle. Okay, very
Triangle.
good.
Thank you.
Okay. So the objectives, the assessment, and the activities. Number 3.
How can we, how will measure our progress?
How to measure our progress, which means
Yes.
how to be reflective and how to
Mm.
always watch what we're doing and monitor what we're doing in the classroom, so that we do not only help our students, but we also help ourselves as teachers, because we always want to excel in our career as professionals. Okay, very good. Number 4. Number 4, anyone?
Can I speak, Miss?
Of course, of course, of course.
Okay, thank you for the time given. So I get the point. Too many actually, but one, the important one for me is design activities, more specific activities. Yeah.
Okay, specific activities or communicative activities. Excellent. Number 4. Number 5, anybody? I need 4 more. Number 5. Oh, that's it? You only learned 4 things? Go ahead. Yes.
Make a stronger introduction to make better conclusion.
Okay, very good. Make a strong introduction. Number 6, excellent. Number 6.
Maybe we can find new vocabularies in the class.
Sorry?
Find new vocabularies.
Vocabulary. Okay, yes. Okay, so I'm going to try to write these as we spoke. So everybody said smart objectives. Communicative activities. Strong intro and conclusion. What else did we say? Sorry. Vocabulary. What did we say about vocabulary?
We can find new vocabularies.
So introduce. You mean introduce new vocabulary?
Yes.
Oh, I would say okay. So introduce vocabulary. Introducing vocabulary in context, right? So it has to always be in context. What else? What else did we say? I can't. Can you remind me if somebody said something and I didn't write it on the slide? Can you please remind me what you said?
Triangle. The
The triangle. The triangle. Very good. Okay, we need 3 more. Any other volunteers?
Can I speak again?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes,
Of
please.
course.
Thank you very much for the time again. How about the assessment?
Assessment is key.
Is the key, yeah.
Collecting evidence. And we also talked about being reflective teachers. One last one. Final one.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Perhaps plan for obstacles.
Okay, anticipate. Anticipate what? Challenging situations and be confident that you can handle it. I want you to be very positive and know that that's my ending statement for you guys, that teaching in the beginning can be a little bit challenging because you're learning this. It's just like a doctor. If they're learning about stuff in a book, they're not going to be comfortable until they go and be in the office and deal with patients. Teachers are like that. You're learning the stuff from me, from your lecturers, from so many amazing people in your university, but you will never feel fully comfortable until you are in your own classroom with your students. And it can be a little bit challenging in the beginning, but it's going to be easier every single day as you spend more time with your students. And at the end of the day, as I said, you are the one who knows the most about your students. Your students love you the most. You know what they need, and you will be able to make changes based on their needs and based on their ability levels. Okay. And the last thing that I have is final remarks. If you have any, so I wanted next lesson to be about authentic choosing your materials, but I also might spend more time on lesson planning. If you guys want a specific area of lesson planning that you want me to focus on next time, please mention it to Dr. Siti Tarwiya and let her email me, and I will keep that in mind when I'm planning the next lecture. Okay? And for now, if you have any questions, I'm open to questions.
I want to ask about
Okay,
Yeah.
any questions?
Yeah, can I ask question, please?
Yes, of course, you can ask a question.
Yeah, actually, this is related to the previous question, but I think I'm like not really. I'm confident enough with the my speaking ability, but not with writing ability. Do you have any like suggestion or tips for me to makes me like more confident to writing? Because I'd love sometimes I have some friends from other countries and I'd love to chat with them, but I'm not confident enough with my grammar. Can you get some tips for me to like what is that? My grammar better? Thank you.
I just want to tell you that writing is yeah, it's not only my opinion, but so many people say writing is the most challenging part of learning any language, because when you are speaking, you don't really have to be very formal, but when you are writing, you have to really obey certain rules, and it makes
Yeah.
it a little bit more challenging for language learners than other areas of language. I would suggest, do you have a writing center in your university? Like, do you have like many universities have a writing center, so they would be helping students write in English and giving them a lot of feedback on the writing. Is that something available in your school or not?
Actually, I think there is no something like that in my university.
Okay, so what you can do is you can look for maybe um, there has to be like writing coaches and language institutions in your area that provide language coaching. And what can happen is that you can work with somebody on specifically writing. You write and they provide you with feedback. You write and provide you with feedback. Because again, writing is an area that you need so much feedback on, just like somebody just asked me about speaking. Speaking, you
Yeah,
need to practice, and writing, you need to write a lot.
yeah,
And you have to also keep in mind that you cannot try to translate your ideas from your native language to English. It does not
yeah.
work.
It is different.
You have to make sure that you just follow the structure and the rules of the English language. Because if you think about your language and try to translate it, so many expressions and forms and grammar rules in English do not exist in other languages.
Yeah,
And there are also rules in our languages that do not exist in English. And
yeah.
there
It's
are
different.
vocabulary words specific to each language. So sometimes you try to translate and it comes across as really, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So I, if you have a professor maybe in your university who's willing to help you by being a writing coach, I would suggest that.
yeah,
Maybe you can do it. You don't have to do it all the time because you're already so overwhelmed with your assignments and your work. So I would say maybe find a professor or a lecturer in your university that is like fluent in the English language, and ask them if they can be a writing coach. Maybe you can write something and give it to them and they can provide you with feedback. And they don't have to give you feedback on everything at the same time because it can become very overwhelming to receive feedback on everything. They can focus on one area at a time. So they can tell you, okay, this time I'm going to focus on grammar mistakes only. Next time I'm going to focus on if the ideas are clear or not. The following time, I'm just going to focus on vocabulary use. So don't let them provide you feedback on everything. Focus on one thing at a time. And I think the writing coach is the best thing that you can do. And maybe this is something that lecturers in your university, maybe I can't suggest because I don't work there. I don't know what resources they have, but they can maybe guide you to certain individuals in your school that can be writing coaches.
yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions?
Okay, it's 10:05 in this country, and I think 11:05 in your country. Is it okay? We still have questions.
If you have, maybe I can. Okay, yeah, we can do like maybe a couple of 2 more questions if you guys want. It's just getting late here. I'm getting sleepy. So if you have 2 more questions, we can do 2 more questions, and then if again, Dr. City, if they have any questions, specific suggestions or topics that they want to learn about for next time, email me and I will try to include them in next time's lecture. Because today I feel like there was so much information, and maybe we can talk more about more of these ideas next time if they want. Okay. So
Okay.
any more questions? Please ask me any questions.
Any more
Ask
questions?
me. Ask me. I see your hand up. You're here.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask one thing?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Could you please give me some suggestion related to the assessment?
Somewhat. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Part. Sorry. Because sometimes students develop lesson plan on their research, for example, without put the assessment part.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about it? I mean, should the part
Okay.
be put in
Yes.
every or each lesson plan, even
It
the
should.
lesson for the research?
Well, I don't know what exactly you teach in the research class, but I think assessment has to always be there in one way or another. It might look a little bit different in a research class because it's not really a language class, so it might not be exactly like what I described today. It might be something more related to research work, but I think you want your students to see the importance of including assessment every time they develop a lesson, because it has to be part of their practice as a teacher. And assessment is such a big area that there is actually programs and PhDs only on assessment. So, because it's a very, very big field and it's super important. So I would say yes, they have to include assessment, but as a lecturer, you would be able to tell them exactly how you want the assessment to look like based on your class and the needs that they have in this class. So it's not a language class, it's a research class, so assessment is going to look different. Okay? I hope this answered your question.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you,
No
Doctor.
problem. No problem. Any more questions?
May I, Ma'am Tarwiyah, as a
Yeah,
moderator?
one more question. Yeah, this is the last question.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma'am Tarwiyah, as a moderator. Well, is it okay if I call Salma? Yeah, Bu Tarwiyah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Well, relates with the previous question Bu asked me, relates with the assessment. Well, in Indonesia, there are three kinds of assessment, right, Bu Tarwiyah? Not only cognitive, but also attitudinal, but yeah, relates with something character, or perhaps could you please elaborate more there, the kind of attitude assessment, Salma?
Okay, so the assessment, the kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
assessment, yeah, the kind of assessment that I spoke about today is very specific to language teaching, and you might have character assessment in other fields, but it's not really related to language. So this is not why I did this is why I did not really bring it up in our presentation today. But usually, I would assume in language learning, if you're teaching the students how to speak in English, you also want them to be appropriate, and you want them to be polite, and you want them to be able to present themselves in a good manner, and you want them to be able to communicate like they would communicate with a native speaker. So I would say the behavior part is not really related to language. This is something that you would decide as a teacher. But if you're doing something like a presentation, for example, asking the students to do, if it's a more advanced group of students and you're asking them to give a presentation, you can include aspects like confidence, body language, um, choice of words, eye contact, facial expressions. These things you can include them in the grading as well. So, for example, if they're giving a final presentation to the whole class, if it's a more advanced group and they have to do a PowerPoint or they have to do a poster, you can give them a rubric. And the rubric is going to have information about how you will grade them. This is something I suggest for teachers and professors to do. Always give your students the rubric in advance so that they would know what to expect and how you're going to grade them. And it's going to have different components. So going to grade them on language, vocabulary, grammar, um, the contents that they're presenting, and then you're also going to include the attitude and character part, body language, facial expressions, and stuff like that. Because it's also part of conveying yourself and carrying yourself as a good speaker and a presenter in the future, which is something that all the teachers in your department need, because they are going to stand in their own classrooms and they have to be comfortable. They have to know how to use their facial expressions and body language is in an effective way. So yes, in a presentation, you can definitely include these components. Okay?
Thank you very much.
No
Really
problem.
insightful. Thank you.
Yes,
you.
and
Okay.
you can send, I'm gonna share my email here on the chat room. You can connect with me. Somebody just asked for my email. And here you go. I sent it on the chat. If you have any questions, you can direct their questions to me. And again, if you have any suggestions for anything else that you want to do next week, my plan was that we're going to do material design, but I'm also open to include other topics because it's 2 hours. So if you have any suggestions, I'm also more than happy to include these topics. And I hope this was informative and you enjoyed it. I'm sorry if I spoke so much. I hope it was good for everyone and it was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for much information, inspiring presentation. Yeah, it's very meaningful for us, of course, to improve our teaching learning process. Yeah, and especially for our students. Yeah, it's good preparedness for them to be our future teachers. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that there are still many questions. Yeah, and I myself also in fact has a question, but I plan to write
Ask your
it to
question.
you.
You can ask your question. It's okay. I can take your question.
Okay.
Ask.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my question is this. Yeah, you have many experiences of teaching in many countries, and do you have this experience? You have new class, yeah, and then you have not get information about you haven't got information about the characteristic of students, for example. You are not familiar with the students, yeah, and then anyway, you must teach the class. Of course, you plan your lesson. You plan your lesson, and this is of course a good plan, and then you implement your plan. But unfortunately, your plan here doesn't go, yeah, because of one or another reason, yeah, because of wrong identification of students' characteristics of learning, for example, students' interest, for example. So what you do if you have this kind of experience?
I would take a breath and not panic because
yeah,
this happens.
Usually we are panicked and
all the time.
Our concentration. Yeah, so that's what to do.
So what to do is then you have to be flexible and you have to understand that things are not always going to go as planned. And that sometimes you're going to have the best plan ever, but it's not going to work because you are going to have outside factors like students who are new or who do not have the background, or something happens in the environment and messes up your classroom, or no electricity or something. These things happen all the time. So in that situation, you will have to just improvise. You will have to just immediately react and try to do something useful with the students. It can even be something very simple like let's do an introduction, interview each other, ask each other questions, keep the students busy while you're trying to learn about the new student and get some information about the new student. And then not panic so much, because sometimes, as I said, you plan a very good lesson and then it doesn't work. The students are not responding. And if the students are not responding, it means maybe the plan is not good. Maybe the lesson is too advanced for your students. It's a way for you to learn about how can I adjust this to make it better for my students in the future. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe it's not engaging. Maybe the strategies are not interesting. Can I try a different method in the future and see if it works or not? Yes. Tomorrow, when I come to my class, I'm going to try a different technique and see how it works. And then I'm going to sit by myself afterwards and think about the two classes. Which one was more effective? Which strategy should I use with my students? Okay, so maybe my students prefer this more. Also, I would suggest, because we have so many students with very different learning styles, in the beginning, I would give them a learning style survey. It's like a quiz, and the students, it's just ask questions about what they like to do and stuff like that, and then you can there is online quizzes, learning style quizzes that you can find online. You can ask the students to take it online and print it out and show it to you. It tells you if your students like to learn by doing or by listening or by seeing, and it helps you plan your activities in such a way that you would appeal to the most of your students in the class. So if most of your students like to listen, then you have to have more videos, you have to have more things for the students to watch and listen to in the class. If it's visuals, you have to have more graphs and more pictures. So all these things are ways for you to learn more about your students. So I would say the key is to spend more time with your students and learn more about what they need, even if it doesn't work the first time. Even if the class is a failure the first time, it's okay. Don't panic. Try a different strategy. Try to learn more about your students. Spend more time with them and learn about their learning styles, their backgrounds, their cultures. Do some diagnostic assessment for them and learn about what is their English language proficiency level. And based on all this information, second one I'm sure is going to work. It's just like a trial and error sometimes. Sometimes you do something very well, but it doesn't work. And then you have to just change the plan. Always have a plan B. Things are not always going to work perfectly as you expect them. Sometimes they just don't work. And the key is to be flexible, agile, and remember that it's okay to make mistakes. Nobody's going to judge you. You are going to judge yourself, and you want to be a reflective teacher, and you want to be a person who achieves excellence in the future. So, and your students are not going to notice it. The only person who notices it is you. Okay? So you are going to notice it more than anybody else. You, and the more experience you have, you're going to realize, okay, I feel like the class is not going well. Am I doing something wrong as a teacher? Okay, maybe I should stop, not continue this activity, and I should do something else, because it's becoming very frustrating. Nobody is paying attention and it's becoming very difficult. That's not good. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to do something more simple, a discussion, questions and answers, watch a video with them. And after class, I'm going to think about it and see how I can make it work better for them in the future. Okay, so I hope this answer. I think there is so many ways you can think about this question.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, many answers for one question. Yeah, okay, from the expert. Yeah, because it comes from the expert. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, I think it's time to end our lesson, our session. Yeah. Thanks for 20 minutes bonus. And sorry for making you have dying presentation. Yeah, okay. And have a nice dream, because it's time for you to go bed after this session, I think. And to all participants, yeah, thanks for joining until the last session, and see you next week with a session with Dr. Salma also in the same session, but different focus, yeah? Okay, thank you. And let us recite Alhamdulillah together to close our meeting today. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Okay, goodbye Salma. Goodbye all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Assalamualaikum.